I'm back discussing the lost media of a tragic queen executed by the Tudors. Being a tragic queen means that a lot of people want to make operas about you centuries later. I hopefully won't have to do this for every single queen that I cover, although then again, Catherine de Medici, what does your lost media look like? Okay, well, I'm not including Horrible Histories after season 5, because the rest of that show does not exist in Ba Sing Se. There's a Lost Doctor Who serial, that'd be interesting. The 1954 La Reine Margot, there is a YouTube upload but no subtitles, and that seems to be it for now. It depends on if I can locate the older films or not, and if they're foreign films, if they have subtitles. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. The purpose of this film is to call attention mostly to lost silent films and operas, as they can be tricky to source. Film historians will tell you that when celluloid became the next big thing, studios were making tons of films at varying length and quality. However, very little care was taken into preserving or storing film for quite a long time. What's more, before plastic, celluloid was a highly flammable product. Theatres were well air-conditioned just to stop the film canisters from catching fire and taking the whole cinema with it. Therefore, many early films have been lost, and only a fraction still survive today. The survival of an opera, especially one that was composed long before sound could be recorded, depends solely on its popularity when it first came out, if it ever got that far. I will settle for a full recording of the score, but if there is a pro shot available, that's even better, and the same goes for musicals. If I can see them for myself or get the soundtrack, then I'm able to make my judgment. Mary Queen of Scots has a lot of operas written about her, and I could only get 2 of them in full. Technically, this film is not lost anymore. However, I was unable to find an online recording of it, so I will simply have to put it here, rather than ignore the film altogether. The Loves of Mary Queen of Scots was the first biographical film about Mary. Yes, there is also that other silent film that came about at the turn of the century, but I will be saving that one for the rankings. The plot of the film spanned from Mary's life in France to her execution in England, including all her husbands, Francois II, Darnley and Bothwell. It featured the first on-screen incarnation of the 4 Marys, although for some reason both Betty Fair and Dorothy Fane are both credited as Mary Beaton. Meanwhile, Nancy Kenyon played Mary Fleming and Julie Hartley Milburn played Mary Seton. The film also has an uncredited appearance by Basil Rathbone. Once again, I am finding a lot of odd connections between Mary and Richard III. I promised it was just a coincidence to cover them both at the same time. Mary was played by Fay Compton, originally known as Virginia Lillian Emmeline Compton Mackenzie. She was better known for her stage work rather than film work, although she did feature in over 40 films. She retired from acting in 1970. By then, she was widowed twice and divorced twice. She would pass away 8 years later, on the 12th of December in her early 80s. The studio behind the film Ideal was one of the most prolific, especially during World War I. However, just after this film was released, the studio was hit by the slump of 1924. This happened because British films were losing out thanks to the influx of American-made film. Many studios closed their doors, but Ideal found new life in 1927, after the cinematograph, it's easier to read than it is to say, after the passing of the Cinematograph Film Act of 1927, which required cinemas to show British-made films, and I'm sure the invention of talkies also helped. The film was considered to be lost for almost 100 years, but was recently discovered, although some of the print has deteriorated. It received a restorative premiere last year at the 2022 Hippodrome Silent Film Festival. Unfortunately, a public release has not yet emerged, so I was unable to watch it. Gaetano Donizetti is probably the best-known Italian composer for making tragical operas about people being screwed over by the Tudors. Mary was considered a sympathetic figure by European Catholics, while Elizabeth got the reputation of being a cruel tyrant who gave up her femininity to cling to power. This carried its own controversy in Italy, as Mary was a figurehead to a series of revolutionary societies known as the Carbonari, which has nothing to do with spaghetti, cheese sauce and bits of bacon. They were fascinated by the espionage surrounding Mary, especially the plots that were made to free her. As a result, many operas about her were banned, Donizetti's being one of them. Now I'm going to list a lot of Italian composers, and I may butcher the pronunciation. Pietro Coccia. Wait, in Italy do they say two L's as Y like in Spain, or is it Casella? Pietro Coccia wrote the first opera about Mary in the 19th century, simply titled Maria Stuarda. Not much is known about him or his work besides his opera, and he passed away in 1843. Pascal Sogner started writing operas in his early 20s, while also working as a singing and composing teacher. He wrote the score and libretto for Maria Stuarda, which premiered at the Teatro San Moisì on the 26th of December. He does not appear to have garnered much success with his work, as he allegedly died in poverty after retiring and turning to alcoholism in 1842. Luigi Carlini composed Maria Stuarda Regina di Scozia in 1818. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any information about him. Saviero Mercadante is someone we do know on the other hand. He was basically the Salieri to Donizetti's Mozart. He was encouraged to pursue opera by Gioacchino Rossini. Besides his second opera, Violenza a Costanza, much of his other work has been forgotten. His opera about Mary, also titled Maria Stuarda Regina di Scozia, has only an abridged recording available, but you can still find the full libretto that was written by Gaetano Rosso. It premiered in Bologna, Italy, at the Teatro Comunale on the 29th of May, 1821. Unlike the Donizetti opera, which focused on the Babington plot and her execution, Mercadante's rendition took place in Scotland. Lord Darnley was renamed to Alfredo, and a fictional character defends Mary. The recording has been praised for its outrageous vocals by lead soprano Judith Howarth. I don't need to do an Italian accent for that. The recording has been praised for its outrageous vocals by lead soprano Judith Howarth, while also having hints of Rossini's influence near the finale. Carlo Coccia's opera was also called Maria Stuarda Regina di Scozia. Drink every time I say that. He was a Neapolitan composer who early on in his career was living in Venice, before accusations of plagiarism, criticism in his rushed operas, and being overshadowed by Rossini caused him to leave for Lisbon. His Maria Stuarda was composed when he was living in London, which was to be staged at the King's Theatre in 1827. At the time there was some controversy, as throughout the Georgian era the crown would struggle with the last gasps of the Stuart lineage until 1807. George IV had fortunately renewed interest in Scottish culture, but he wasn't a very popular guy at the best of times, so that can hardly be counted as a win.
People hated us and we hated them too. Born to rule over you.
Carlo Coccia wrote the part of Mary especially for the famous soprano Giuditta Pasta. Yes, her last name really was Pasta. I want some pasta. Who, in preparing for the role, visited Mary's tomb at Westminster Abbey. The libretto was written by Pietro Gione. It premiered on the 7th of June 1827 for a whopping 4 performances, as well as the rambling narrative and the numerous subplots and the way Gione walked on eggshells to avoid allusions to Mary's Catholic faith and making Elizabeth too nasty. The production was a mess. It was not the parting triumph Coccia might have hoped for. All sorts of clumsy hitches seemed to have afflicted the staging in London. It was badly rehearsed, it appears. The singers took great liberties with their music, improvising boldly and inserting cadenzas without warning. It was poorly dressed, according to some accounts, and the orchestra did not know its music. No wonder it puzzled so many listeners. All of which catalogue of defects is perfectly astonishing when, after all, Coccia was musical director of the theatre in question. It was far too long. Due to its length it was shortened even before the prima and then successively over the 4 evenings, so that 1/3 of its music at least was missing at the final curtain. But these cuts have a certain relevance. Maria Stuart Regina di Scozia, in the form it was performed on its last days, resembles very closely that of Maria Stuarda as written by Donizetti in Naples in 1834. Its structure, sequence, content and dramatic flow are very much the same. This may be one of the first of the many compelling reasons for claiming that it was the genial Neapolitan Carlo Coccia who supplied a model for his Bergamasque friend when he got back to his native city. Coccia took the score with him under his arm when he left London for Italy a few months later. It was still in his possession at his death in 1873. François-Joseph Fétis was a Belgian composer. He was something of a prodigy, becoming the organist for St. Waltraud in Mons aged 9. In 1827 he founded the first French paper to be dedicated to musical affairs, called the Revue Musicale. In 1833 he became the director of the Royal Conservatory of Brussels. He would also become infamous for starting a long media-related rivalry with Louis-Hector Berlioz. You can find snippets of his work hither and thither about the internet. Unfortunately, I can't access most of the academic articles about his operas. I only know that his Marie Stuart en Écosse was published in 1823 while he was still living in Paris. Louis Niedermeyer was a Swiss composer. Marie Stuart was his fourth opera composed, and the second time one of his compositions would be shown in a grand spectacle. The libretto was written by Theodore Anne. It covers her return to Scotland and her eventual execution. It premiered on the 6th of December 1844 at the Théâtre de l'Académie Royale de Musique, with King Louis Philippe in attendance. Mary was played by mezzo-soprano Rosine Stoltz. While the opera enjoyed only a modest success, Niedermeyer was knighted after the premiere. It was forgotten about after 1846, when the Paris Opera dropped it from its repertoire. Throughout the years it has been revived, albeit abridged, with limited performance in Stuttgart, Zurich and Italy. Today, this opera only exists in segments, being available in limited spaces online. Perhaps it would be a good idea to put them back together again. Mary Moore was an American composer from Memphis, Tennessee, as well as a music teacher. David Rizzio was her third opera, which she was commissioned to write for a Venice production in 1932. She wrote the music and the libretto, which was the only one of her works to be written in Italian. However, the project never came to pass, and it was staged in Los Angeles by an amateur company. A full recording is not available, but you can find segments of it from a recording of her piano work that was captured in 1934. More like traditional forms of music, like Romanticism, she took advantage of playing with tone in the writing of David Rizzio. She despised modernism in music to the point she walked out of an avant-garde performance. Yes, I'm stopping mid-recording to just make sure the lipstick looks okay. Bain Murray was a music professor from Cleveland State University from Evanston, Illinois, and a World War II veteran. He was considered a melodic composer and had a deep love of the works of Emily Dickinson and Robert Frost, poetry that captured the voice of the human soul and its relation to nature. He was also fascinated by the music of indigenous American cultures, which inspired his first opera, The Legend. Mary Stuart, A Queen Betrayed was Murray's second opera, based on the biography by Antonia Fraser. He composed the score while Leonard Trewick, who was a Cleveland poet with Scottish and English heritage, wrote the libretto. Murray was recovering from a life-threatening illness at the time, and could be found at Shaker Lakes Nature Reserve writing music while resting on a bench. Mary Stuart, A Queen Betrayed premiered in 1991 at the Cleveland State University's Music and Communications Building, the first opera to be staged there. It was positively received. Murray passed away 2 years later in 1993. The libretto is available for purchase, although it is quite a lot of money. And while the recording has been preserved by Cleveland State University Library, I'm unable to access it, as it appears that the items are only physical and have not been made digitally available. There must be a lot of legalities if there is not a widely released recording. It's a shame because I want to see the Mary Queen of Scots equivalent of Fire and Ice, or Hope is the Thing with Feathers, although by a total coincidence, I must say, I've already picked the poem to read at the final Mary Queen of Scots episode, and it is a poem by Robert Frost. Complete coincidence. I would hesitate to call Mary Queen of Scots operas cursed, just too ahead of their time. In the Western world, we take making controversial media about long dead people for granted. As you'll come to see in the next video, we have a lot of depictions that portray Mary sympathetically, or at the very least realistically. Italy in the 19th century was a pretty crazy place to be. It took 23 years to unify all those smaller states into a single country. Any dissidents that would disturb that peace would have set the movement back. Furthermore, Europe had a growing fear of revolutionaries as a whole, and the idea of the lower classes rising up. I can imagine that some of the French upper classes didn't take kindly to an opera about a former Queen Consort of France getting her head cut off. Still, it's interesting to see how history outside the theatre affected these operas, and it's been fun digging through the online sources to get a clearer picture. A good trick for anyone researching someone is to look at the bibliography and the footnotes within a Wikipedia article to expand your sources. Also, the Internet Archive. It's a lifesaver. Before we go, I would just like to make an announcement. Some of you might have noticed in my previous Richard III video that we have new additions to the household. In other words, I've got new cats. Their names are Louis and Sasha. Louis is a silver tabby British short hair. He also answers to the names Lulu, Larry, Sweet Sweet and Clumpy Butt. And Sasha is a lilac British short hair. He also answers to Sash Sash, Sandy, Purple Boy, Golden Eye and Henry Catville as the Whisker. They are British Shorthair pedigrees, they are related, they're brothers from another mother, and they're 7 years old. We've taken them in because their previous owner has sadly passed away, and their previous owner's daughter didn't want them to be put in a rescue centre and not be able to see them again. So she's asked us if we can take them in, and we have. But yes, other than that, thank you for watching the video. I hope you're all looking forward to the Mary Queen of Scots rankings. I know that one's going to be a really long list, and how do I not do this without making every segment 2,000 words long? I'm going to have to set a word limit for every segment. And if you don't want to miss that, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for the notification so you don't miss this. I really want to get this out in November, but there is a possibility it might not come out in November, it might come out in December instead. But just hold on, because I do have other videos coming out too. So I'm working on Mary Queen of Scots and Richard III at the same time, so one or the other's going to show up soon. The Richard III rankings will be the next video to come out on my channel, and hopefully the Mary Queen of Scots rankings will follow afterwards. And of course, I want to thank my patrons who support my channel and make sure that I can still do what I'm doing and even improve on it. If you want to become a patron, there's a link in the description as always. You can get certain benefits like getting your name in the credits, as well as getting early access to scripts and videos, and of course there's a Discord that all patrons can access and talk with me on certain things. And my King and Queen patrons, who are the highest contributing patrons, get a shout out in the credits for every video I do that I charge patrons for. So thank you Alison Cuff, Anna from Gustine, Annalise Barnett, Jill Mynero, Larissa and Leslie Williams.